Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Matt Capper, and this is another video on Raid Shadow Legends. I'm finally back, so we are back on the content train. I thought, what better way to jump right back into creating some content for all of you than to go over the current patch notes, which are going to be arriving soon. I don't know if it's this week or next week. I hope not during CVC, because I feel like some of these things will break the game. Please don't break the game during CVC. So let's bring it up and we can go over it together like a happy family. First, we've got the Reserve Vault. Reserve Vault is a place where you can store your champions in addition to the Master Champion Vault, albeit you'll only be able to send champions without artifacts or accessories. There'll be a maximum of 300. You'll have to open up probably anything past 100 or maybe, past 200, whatever it is the number is. I can't remember what it was for the other things, but you'll do it in groups of 10. You'll spend silver or gems. It'll be lower than the Master Vault price. Because champion in the Reserve Vault are not allowed any gear, you'll be prompted to remove everything with a pop-up the moment you put a champion in there. Otherwise, you'll be able to use them the exact same way. So what this tells me is you've got Faction Guardians. You're going to put the paired Faction Guardian that you don't use, if you don't use them, into this vault. Plus any champions that you may have used at one time. I'm thinking my Man-Eaters, for example. I don't use them anymore. Pop them into that Reserve Vault because they're still there. I'm not going to delete them or use them for food. But I might want to use them again someday. But in the meantime, fire them in there. I think this is a pretty good idea. I understand why functionally they're doing it. There's a real problem with gear. Gear is very intensive on their servers. I don't know why. I don't care why. It's not my problem. It's theirs. But for whatever reason, when you equip a champion with gear, it bloats that champion to excessive numbers, and it's the gear's the problem. You know it. I'm sure you've gone into the gear and you've done a show all, so you've got like 2,000 pieces, including all the gear and all the champions, and you start swapping gear in and out, and after about 2 minutes, it starts slowing down and getting really bad lag. That's what happens, and that's because of the gear. So that is the reason why it took them so long to increase vault space, is because they literally, it's so data intensive for whatever reason. It's a server nightmare for them. I don't know why. Again, their code, their problem, probably was done before they took over, but nonetheless, that is where we're at with it. So this is an easy way to do that, because obviously the champion itself isn't the problem. So if you can get naked champions, throw them in there in long-term reserve, but still be able to use them for faction guardians, still be able to use them in that manner, then at least alleviate some of the space problems. I do like the idea. Hex rebalance. So the hex rebalance. So we've decided this particular debuff needs to be changed to become more useful, especially considering the general rarity among champions of Teleria. You want general rarity, counterattack champion. We still only have 3. We have 2 Spirit Affinity Legendary and 1 Force Affinity Epic. Why do we not have a Void Affinity? Why do we not have a Magic Affinity? Give me another counterattack champion. Like, it's not. They're not even the soup du jour anymore. Counterattack has gone by the way of the dodo a long time ago, but some of us still want to use it. Some of us still want to have a little fun. So please, hashtag give me back my damn. Okay, whatever. Do it. Anyway. So Hex rebalance. So what are they going to do now? The champions under this debuff receive damage when their allies receive damage, 10% for single target attacks, or additional 2% for AoE attacks. This is extra damage, not subtracted from the actual attack. Champions under Hex debuffs only take damage from direct attacks on their allies, not lasting effects such as poison, HP, burn, bombs, reflect, etc., etc. But the damage from Hex ignores this champions. Why does reflect damage not do it? It's not a lasting effect. It's a positive effect on you. They're taking instant damage. That reflect should properly work on this. But who cares? That's minor. So basically, whatever damage you do, 10% of that damage. And we're talking single target here. So I'm gonna bring in who's one of the big single target ones, like a Turvold. And Turvold's gonna hit Hydra Boss number 1, and then that's gonna ripple to 10% of that on Hydra 2, 3, and 4. Sounds good. I'm curious as to where that goes and how useful it'll actually be. So in order to be useful, there has to be multiple opponents on the screen. That makes sense, right? So clan boss, it doesn't mean jack all. Any and all boss fights doesn't mean anything. Maybe Ice Golem, you're like, ooh, we can get extra time, but honestly, whatever. You're really looking at multi-attacks. You're looking at waves, say Doom Tower, and the Hydra boss. I was kind of thinking, can we use this for Spider? But the problem is the Spiderlings have such low health compared to the Spider. Even if you hit a Spiderling for 300,000, it's only 30,000 out of what 4.5 million or whatever the HP is on these Spider. Even more for 21 through 25. So I don't see it being useful at all. To be perfectly honest, Hydra is such a low percentage play compared to other game modes in this game that Hex, which already is supposed to be used in Hydra, this is really the only place that you're going to see any lasting, sustained effect. I mean, you can argue maybe the Eternal Dragon. I think that's the one that's got the 3 ads. But again, there's such a disparity between that health and this that when you hit this and you hit for what, 100k, 10k, 500,000, it's still only going to be 50,000 against a boss that has millions of HP. So even for the Eternal, the Frost, which you don't normally do, but the Nether Spider, all these ones, it's kind of a little bit small. And then of course PvP, I just think maybe if there's a champion that has Hex and debuffs or something where you can move it in there, but I just think it's too ticky-tacky. Maybe as more champions are developed, maybe where a sustained champion, a champion that can actually take damage, has Hex, more of those champions, maybe this will work. But I don't see it as a big deal. I don't see it will change a thing. I still think Hex will be a lost debuff in this game, my opinion. New skin for Kale. For Kale. Why don't you just come out and say you like Kale best? Why don't you just shit on Gaelic? Well, Gallic. He's apparently he's from the British Isles. Gallic. Why don't you just shit on Elahane? Why don't you just shit on Aethel? You know? It's bad enough you don't even let Aethel skate on the pond because she got eaten by the dragon. The other thing got burned to a crisp. I think she has a better chance of survival in his stomach than they do being barbecued, Korean barbecue style. But the person left it and they're dead. They're burnt to a crisp. There's nothing left. God, that drives me nuts. Okay. Oh, sure. Whatever. New skin Kale. Whoopie-doo. By the way, as predicted, my guess was that the $50 skins were too expensive. The $40 skin was too expensive. So they've dropped it again for the for Trunda. I don't know how many people have bought it. I suspect it won't be good. I, as you can see, did buy the skin for Cold Heart. I won't buy another skin unless it's A, under $20, and B, for an arena champion. Under $20. $10 would be perfect. 15 sounds good. 20, if it was Kymar, maybe. But it's got to be a champion that I use and a lot and see. So just so we're all on the same page. Anyway, new skin. New champions. Walking Tomb Dreng. We are running out of names for champions, boys and girls. Walking Tomb Dreng. Dreng. Spirit HP Knights Rev. All okay. Still no Skinwalker. Apparently, Skinwalkers are the scourge of the earth. Corpse Fire. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Instantly activates any HP burn debuffs on the target after attacking. Okay. When it says activates, it doesn't consume them. It just... I don't know. On an A1. That's interesting. Attacks all enemies. Has a 75% chance of placing HP burn debuff on all enemies. For 2 turns, this debuff cannot be resisted. Oh, hey, yeah. Interesting. We'll get back to that on my thoughts. Equalize the HP of all allies and attacks one enemy. The HP levels of all allies will be brought up to the level of the ally with the highest HP. The attack will ignore 30% of the target's defense if the target's current HP is equal to or lower than this champion's current HP. We don't know what his base HP is, but sounds good. Will decrease the cooldown of Exalted Pyre by 1 turn if the target's current HP is higher than this champion's current HP. Okay, so boss fight. So just what is Exalted Pyre is a 4-turn bookable to 3-turn. Okay. Reflects 30% of the damage this champion receives back to the attack if the champion has 50% HP or more. Deals 30% more damage instead if this champion has less than 50% HP. Who cares? You can't force reflect damage to be good. You can't. You just have to rework how reflect damage works if you want it to be good. It's not good. Increases ally HP in all battles by 30%. So, yeah, okay. So, this is interesting. So you've got a 4-turn cooldown when booked. Equalizes HP of all allies. That's there's a couple champions that have that ability. It can be good. I think if you have a couple really beefy high defense champions, I'm thinking Hydra Boss again, and you got champions that are a little bit more squishy, this will really help. You can exploit it by making a low HP, very, very high defense champion that loses very little health, and then you can have some low defense, high HP champions that can heal, that can expand the heals, equalize the heals really well. You can use that maybe. Well, we're gonna play with that. I think that'll be fun. And then ignores 30% of the target's defense if it's not a boss, essentially, because this is an HP champion, so most champions will have lower HP than it. I mean, obviously there'll be a couple exceptions there. Decrease the cooldown of Exalted Pyre by 1 turn, but it's on a 4-turn cooldown, so every 4 turns is potentially could be a 2-turn, otherwise a 3-turn. Attacks all enemies. So HP burn on all enemies for 2 turns. Debuff cannot be resisted. So this champion does not need accuracy at all, which is nice. This is a big deal on a 3-turn cooldown. For any area you want HP burn. This is really good for, obviously, Spider, which we're watching, but I'm also thinking of Hydra Boss, especially with the Poison Cloud boss in effect. And it's a 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown that every once in a while will be a 2-turn cooldown. Attacks one enemy 2 times, instantly activates any HP burn debuffs on the target after attacking. I'm trying to think why that would be. Why is that good? Because if it activates it, it's going to lower the cooldown of it. And it's not like it's going to help Exalted Pyre reapply it because it's a 2 and a 3, or a 2 and a 2 once in a while. So whoever you're attacking is just going to have 1 less HP burn, but it is going to force everyone to take damage. I don't know. I'm trying to think whether Corpse Fire... Let me know in the comments down below. Do you think Corpse Fire is useful? I think it's potential. Why am I way off the screen here, by the way? Here, let's do that. I think there's potential there. I think it's a cool champion. Without the A1, let's just look at this stuff here. It's really good. The passive reflect damage is garbage. Deals 30% more damage. Nice. It'll all depend on what his multipliers are, of course. This ignored defense, but he hits like a wet noodle. Who cares? 30% more damage of 0 is still 0. Those sort of things. But assuming he does give some good damage, and this even without damage, Exalted Pyre is really good, and the equalization can be used very well depending on how you use it. So I do like aspects of this champion. We'll see. This Corpse Fire just on an A1. It's not the same as Sishia, which pops all, right? This is just on the target. So it's basically just taking the 50k or whatever damage that the HP burn does. So we'll see. We'll have to test that. Ragash. Hey, Skinwalker. Look at that. Finally, he's a tiger. It's Tony the Tiger. Tiger's Great Claws. Attacks one enemy 2 times, plus 6% increased defense buff on the champion for 2 turns. Okay. He's a defense-based champion. That's nice. Attacks on enemies has 75, bookable to 100% chance, placing 60% decreased defense on each enemy for 2 turns. On each enemy for 2 turns before attacking. That's just a weird way of saying each enemy. Why don't you say on all enemies? Before attacking, also has a 75, bookable to 100% chance, placing a stun debuff for 1 turn after attacking. Interesting. That's a pretty ridiculous skill at a 3-turn cooldown. Has a 2-turn decreased defense plus a stun. Interesting. Places a strengthen buff and an increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. This also places a perfect veil on this champion for 2 turns. I've never been a fan of perfect veil on a single champion. He's a defense-based champion. Why would I want him hidden? I don't understand. Oh, right here. At the start of each turn, places a perfect veil buff for 1 turn on the ally with the highest attack. Inflicts 20% more damage against targets whose defense is lower than this champion's defense. Increases defense in all other battles. Well, this looks like a fun champion. Again, multipliers are the key, but this looks like a defense-based nuker. Well, that's not true, actually. It looks more like a... It looks like a support champion with nuker. I should take that back. Except for that they say he does more damage. Anytime you do increased damage based on the primary stat, you'd think they're a nuker. So, I don't understand putting this champion in Perfect Veil. I don't understand why. At the start of each turn, plays a Perfect Veil. This I like. It's been there before. It's not the first time. Something like that has been. I mean, I think Quargon has that thing where if you're, it gives you Perfect Veil if you're higher attack than defense, and etc. etc. I'm trying to think of what scenario does it really matter that, because he's a defense-based champion, you want him to be hit. Why would you not want him hit? Maybe he pairs really well with this equalize because he's the perfect. So he's defense-based champion. So he's already taken less damage for most skills, except for obviously ignore defense skills. He's got a perfect veil, which is reducing AOE damage incoming. That gives him the. I like him. He actually looks really good with Walking Tomb. I can see that, but this seems a little bit more gimmicky. Not that he's a bad champion because of it. It's not. I think whether he's a good or bad champion really comes down to what kind of damage he can do. I definitely like the A2 here. The A3 with the strengthen and increased speed is amazing. The perfect veil on himself plus this perfect veil on the ally with the highest attack. There's scenarios, right? Obviously, I like if you can make him really fast in arena, and he can hide him. He can hide him. Essentially, is hiding himself, and the champion with the highest attack, because it's at the start of each turn, not each round. Oh, sorry, excuse me. So it's his turn. I don't know. He still sounds good, but I just think that this sounds better than it actually is. Maybe I'm wrong. I definitely think the start of each turn is going to help you in PvE content where you know you're going first, because you can hide your nuker to reduce damage and ability to single target attack. So, Truath. Attacks when enemy heals his champion by 5% of their max HP. Heals his champion by 10%. Instead, if they have HP 50%. Okay, that's decent. Attacks all enemies. Places a perfect veil buff on all allies except for this champion for 2 turns. Also places a counter attack buff and a strengthen buff on this champion for 2 turns. Okay. The counter attack is nice. Strengthen keeps them alive. Counter attack allows them to heal by 5 or 10% of their health. Heals this target by 20% of this champion's heals a target. Then balances the HP of all allies. This HP levels of all allies will be brought up to the level of the ally with the highest HP. Sounds familiar. After balancing HP, places a 50% ally protection buff on the initial target for 2 turns. That seems a lot of extra thought. Decreases the cooldown of Animus and Fusion by 1 turn for every 10% of this HP. Okay, so that's good. So it's a quick turnaround healer. Is this a champion we needed? No, it's a cool little champion though. Ooh, Shemneth. Oh, what was this, by the way? Dark Elves. Another Dark Elves? Yeah, that's Dark Elves are really struggling. That's good that they got another one. Shemneth. Knights Rev. Okay. I think Knights Rev has suddenly become one of the stronger factions, especially among legendaries. Attacks one enemy 2 times each hit, has a 30% chance of placing a 6% decreased defense on it for 2 turns. I mean, okay, 30, 50%, 2 turn. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Transfers all buffs from this champion to a target enemy, then attacks the enemy 3 times. The first hit increases the duration of all debuffs on the target by 1 turn. Second hit decreases the duration of all buffs on the target by 1 turn. Also increases the duration of all buffs on this champion by 1 turn. Interesting. Attacks all enemies 2 times. The first hit removes all buffs. Second hit will ignore 20% of the target's defense against targets that have no active skills. Why is it saying it attacks all enemies 2 times, but the second hit will ignore 20% of the target's defense against targets that have no active buffs? So as long as they don't resist, they ignore 20% defense. Does target mean it's an AoE skill, but you still target one of the champions, and that's the champion? They probably mean it's an AoE strip, and then ignores our target's defense if the strip was successful. Increases the champion's accuracy by 10 for each buff on each enemy. Increases the champion's crit damage 5% for each debuff on each enemy. Oh, that looks kind of cool. In practice might be different, but I like it. Kyra the Watch. Oh, another dwarf, because dwarves need help. Attacks one enemy has a 50% chance of placing 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Okay. Attacks all enemies has a 75, but equal to 100% chance of decreasing the duration of all enemy buffs by 1 turn. Also has a 75% chance of placing 50% decrease accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Okay. Places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except for this champion for 2 turns. Also places 6% increased defense. That's a pretty standard one. Whenever an ally is attacked while under an ally protection buff, places a 50% decreased attack buff on the attacker for 1 turn. I like it. That's a good support champion. What else you got to say? Hephrax. Demon spawn. Because demon spawns need more help too. Attacks one enemy, places an extra hit if this attack is critical. Okay. Attacks all enemies, places an extra hit on targets with less than 50%. After the first hit, places an extra with less than 50. Okay. Each hit will ignore 15% of the target's defense. Okay. Places a 50% increased attack and an increased crit rate buff on this champion for 3 turns, then grants an extra turn. So it's a 2 turn. I love those ones. And that's a 4 turn cooldown. Ooh, so there's a 1 turn gap. I always hate that 1 turn gap because you want, so the increase, so here's the deal. Increased crit rate is only good if it's equal to the number of turns of cooldown. Otherwise, you still need 100% crit rate because your A1 places an extra hit if the attack is critical. So you want to use the increased crit rate on a 3 turn, which is a 2 turn cooldown because there's an extra turn, or it's 2 turns essentially. And so for 2 turns, you'll be hitting at 100% if you build them up for 70, right? But then that last turn, it doesn't count. It doesn't do anything. So your Megalomania you use, then it uses Hephrax Scorn, and it does all this extra hit and targets, blah, blah, blah. Then the next turn, it does 2 hits because it attacks 1 enemy. Then he's got a turn where he's naked, where he doesn't have that increased crit rate before we get back to Megalomania, which makes no sense. So you're still probably going to build him 100% attack crit rate, which means the increased crit rate is useless. I don't know why the devs don't understand this, that you can only build the increased crit rate into his kit if it makes sense. Now, if you're pairing him with an extender like this dwarf does, excellent. But then you're basically earmarking this guy to only be with someone who extends buffs. I don't like it. I don't like the increased crit rate buff that doesn't equal the cooldown. I think it's stupid, especially when you place a condition around critical hits. Whenever an ally is killed, instantly activates Hephrax Scorn skill, will not put the skill on cooldown. Well, that's kind of neat. If there's multiple champions on the team with this skill, only one will activate. So you can't do multiple Hephrax. Okay. Godfrey Brassclad. Oh, another dwarf. Do you have something against skinwalkers and dwarf and high elves, who are, I believe, the least populated factions right now? Jesus. Attacks one enemy 2 times. First hit has a 50% chance to place a 60% increased defense buff for 2 turns. Decreased defense. Second hit has a 50% chance to place a provoke debuff. Good. Well, it's an A1, so I guess. Defense-based champion. Attacks all enemies. Places stun for 1 turn. Nice. Places an increased defense on all allies for 2 turns. Removes any decreased defense and weakened debuffs from all allies. It's kind of a neat deal and a 3-turn cooldown. Passive. Whenever an ally is attacked while under a block damage buff placed by this... 75% chance to place a stun debuff on the attacker. If the ally is about to get killed by a fatal hit, blocks incoming damage and places a block damage buff on them for 1 turn. So this has a 4-turn cooldown. I think this is garbage. Maybe. Although maybe be good in clan boss. So basically on a 4-turn cooldown, if an ally is about to get killed by a fatal hit, blocks incoming damage and places a block damage buff on them for 1 turn. So when the clan boss is hitting those stuns really hard, this comes in, puts a block damage. They don't get killed, obviously for the first 50 turns only. Then it sets a cooldown of 4 turns, so it would have to be a 4-3 or better comp. But nothing else there really helps them. Yeah, the increased defense maybe is pretty good. The clan boss doesn't put decreased defense and weaken, so that doesn't matter. And you can't stun. So everything else, and can't provoke. So most everything else there is trashy. 50-50 chance on 2 hit for the decreased defense is nice. So you can kind of finagle him in the clan boss. This will only save 1 ally. So in arena, if you're getting hit by Trunda, 1 ally survives. But which ally? Is it your lead? In which case you have your reviver as your lead, like a arbiter. I was trying to think of maybe Duchess, but the thing with Duchess is typically you make that Duchess survive anyway. But maybe it's Duchess. Though Duchess is about to get killed by a fatal hit, blocks incoming damage. She's at full health, then she gets to go, and away you go. I would rather see something like if an ally is about to get killed by a fatal hit, blocks incoming damage, and fills her turn meter. But it also places a block damage buff on them for 1 turn. So it blocks the damage and then puts a block damage on them, so subsequent incoming hits are mostly going to be ignored too. So that's interesting. But I think it's not going to be as impactful as it sounds. I don't like this champion overall. I'm not a huge fan. I do like the AoE stun for 1 turn. This is kind of neat, but the decreased defense weaken. Who puts that? But other champion, like I don't know. It may be some Doom Tower. Maybe it's not as good as I think it is, or that it sounds. This sounds neat, but I would like to see it in practice. If only I had access to the test server. Okay. Necmo Thar, Lizardman, support. Attacks all enemies has a 40% chance of placing a decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Chance increases 75% against targets under debuffs. Okay. Attacks all enemies has a 75% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff and a leech debuff for 2 turns. That's a weird pairing, but it's not awful. I really like it in Hydra. Places a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns and fills their turn meters by 30%, then grants this champion an extra turn on a 4-turn cooldown. Yeah, sure. Good. I like it. That can be used in many different places. I'm sure that there's a lot of good places for that. Fills the champion turn meter by 5% for each debuff plate on an enemy is removed, transferred, or expires. Okay. Increases ally speed and all balance by 19%. It's not an overbearing. I think we already have champions that sort of do these sort of things. Is it a champion we needed? Nah. Does Lizardman really need it? Probably not. But I think it's definitely, if you pull this champion, you're going to get use out of it, I think, for most people. I think endgame people, this is nothing special. This isn't a game changer. Some of these champions are legitimately usable for endgame players. I don't think this is one of them. You could use it, but it's not going to change anything for you, I guess the way I'm putting it. We already talked about the champion rebalance in a previous video, so I'm not going to really go over it. Interesting. This is the most interesting one to me, again, is Venus, because she's already top tier. So it just basically gives her 100% instead of a 50%. 50 to 75 is now going to be 75 to 100 on her HP burn. I guess I feel like that's just another Hydra buff, like her in Hydra. And then a bunch of people say it. So, okay. Lots of champions, some really good ones, all legendaries, which means you still have to pull them. Skin, Kale, Whoopee, Hex Rebalance is unimpactful in my opinion. Maybe it'd be usable. It's definitely better than it was, but I still think it's a dead because of the actual places you'd use it. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. And if you found a place for using it, God bless you. Reserve Vault's a good idea. I think, in my opinion, this is a fluff. I know people are gonna be. This is a fluff balance or a fluff patch. I don't think there's anything really impactful here. I think there's some it's great to get the reserve vault. The rebalance isn't going to change anything. The Kale is useless and just new champions. So when you really look at the patch, what is it, 6 weeks? In 6 weeks, they managed to make a vault. So, and more champions, which they make all the time. They that's nothing new for HLRs. I mean, some people were like, great patch. I don't agree. Honestly, I don't agree. I think it's a fluff patch. I don't think it's that impactful. The reserve vault's great. The Hex Rebalance is trashy, and the new skin for Kale is just for stupid Kale fanboys who think he's OP. And then, frankly, most people replace Kale with other champions right away. Even my free-to-play account, I've never kept Kale in my team for longer than 60 days. So, new skin for Kale is stupid, in my opinion. If it was the big Kale, the other Kale, maybe. But, I guess. Pick a champion that's rare, that's used in the late game scenario. There are champions. Coldheart is one of them. What we really want to see is we want to see Kale in arena, or we want to see skins for champions that are used in the arena, of which Kale is only used until you get a nuker that's better than Kale, of which you have 700 champions. There's better champions than Kale. And that would go for any starter. I know I shit on Kale, but it's really not to harp on it, but whatever. Anyway, the patch, I like the vault. Most of the champions look really cool. There's a couple champions that I'm like meh, and there's a lot of flashy that probably in practice won't work really well, which is similar to the Hex Rebalance itself. Those are my final thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. Oh, I was gonna steal Chosen's peace, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that because here we say be safe, be kind, and we'll see you in the next video.